My name is David. I'm 27 years old, and for the past 4 years, on and off, I've been living in Russia. 1 year in St. Petersburg, 2 years in Volgograd, and this past year I was living in Moscow. And I've been there both in the capacity of a student, someone who studied there, as well as a worker, someone who teaches English. I lived as far away from the center as you could possibly imagine, basically in the ghetto of Moscow. And like every time I would tell locals what part of the city I lived in, they would laugh and just say good luck. And so the place I lived, it's called Chertanovo, but to Russians, there's just funny connotations with this place. And recently, last year, there's a really big budgeted movie made about aliens invading Russia, but not just Russia, specifically this part of Russia. And it was a terrible movie. So now when I say I live in Chertanovo, it's not only that I live in the shittiest part of Moscow, I also live in the part of Moscow where they made a really shitty movie. No, I mean, I think if I had a time machine and I could go back in time and tell 13 or 14-year-old me that, hey, you're gonna end up in Russia at some point, I'd probably tell myself to myself, because it was never even in the back of my mind. It just kind of, I don't know, it kind of grew over time naturally, but it was never a goal from childhood. It was the farthest thing I ever would have imagined. And I had a pretty easy time assimilating, especially compared to other people. But on the other hand, I've run into probably more problems in Russia than any other foreigner I know. So I would say I met friends pretty easily. It's weird, like I think it's somewhat easier to meet friends there. Like you could just be, I don't know, at a bar holding a beer, make eye contact with someone, they'll walk over to your table, start chatting with you, and then you're best friends for life. They'll invite you back to their apartment. So I would say now, amongst the younger generation, like people our age, almost everything they like is what's popular in America. So in terms of music and movies, they really like what's current here. Like if you bring up Russian movies or Russian music to them, like the younger generation kind of laughs and scoffs at it like it's some kind of embarrassing thing. And so no matter how much studying or practice you've done, the real practice happens once you're there. And I could say the same for me. So once you're there, all the textbooks go right out the window and you kind of have to start from scratch. It's weird because it seems to me most Russians are pretty apolitical or apathetic when it comes to politics. They live under the impression that things have always been bad, they're bad now, they're going to be bad in the future, so why should I give a shit? So that seems to be the general attitude. There's a lot of passive people there who can't really be bothered to complain or take action. But on the other hand, there also seems to be this group of people who worship Putin as if he's this big, untouchable god, and how dare you criticize him, and he's the best thing that's ever happened to Russia. So is it worth going to? Absolutely. I highly recommend going to Russia. It's one of the most interesting places in the world. I mean, it's the biggest country in the world, and politically it's a very important country, and historically it's been part of many historic events. There will be a link to my blog in the description below. So if you want to hear me bitch and moan in written form about Russia, then I think I have about half a dozen, I have about a dozen blog entries at this point, and I'm planning to write more.